Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toylist Titles. My name is Justin Stevens. I'm back with you for another episode of the Toylist Titles Offseason Breakdown Specials. Today we have the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City is already a pretty popular team, and especially in the Midwest here. As most of you know, I'm from Indiana, so I'm speaking right at you from the Midwest, but we had to go a little farther north to get today's guest. We had to go up. We had to reach up into Minnesota to get Seth Keysor of The Athletic. Seth, the first thing that I need to know before you start going on about everything that you do and where they can find you, you're in Minnesota. How did you become a Chiefs fan?
Sure. I lived in the Kansas City area during the Montana Magic era, and obviously, pre-DirecTV and pre that kind of stuff. My dad's a really diehard Vikings fan, but he liked Marty, he respected Joe Montana, liked Marcus Allen, Derek Thomas, that whole crew, and so he kind of adopted the Chiefs. And I was pretty young and impressionable, and so I got hooked watching Montana drive them back in a minute and a half at Mile High Stadium there on Monday Night Football, and I was hooked. And my dad loved me enough to not force me to stay a Vikings fan. So we were able to go through it that way, and so I just got hooked then and never looked back.
All right. Well, we can like players and not teams, so you're not going to hate on me for my Justin Jefferson love, right?
Oh, of course not. I mean, Jefferson's a great player. They're my NFC team. Honestly, now that the Chiefs have won one, I'd really love to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl, just for my dad's sake, if nothing else. He was so happy for me that the Chiefs won. I was like, man, could the Vikings just do it one time? We'll see.
Well, that Chiefs team that you were just talking about, that was late 90s, right? Because I kind of remember that in high school. I remember Marcus Allen playing for the Chiefs. So, yeah, that's how old I am, just so you know. So,
well, the Montana era was the early 90s, and then the mid to late 90s, you had some of those Elvis Gerbach, Steve Bono teams, one of which your Colts took out of the playoffs, one of the best Chiefs teams of all time, because they couldn't make field goals, which I'm still not happy about. But what are you going to do? I mean, these things happen.
Yeah, I guess eventually we got to let go. But so where can they find you at?
You can find me at The Athletic. My Twitter handle is at RealMNChiefsFan. I also have a Substack called the Chief of the North Newsletters, where I'm doing most of my work these days. Started it a couple years ago, and it's gone real well. It's a lot of fun being able to dictate what you write, when you write it, and exactly how niche you can go. Do I feel like breaking down every snap of the backup tackle today? Yes, I do. And so then we get to go do that and just go as in depth as we want. So you can find me at any of those places. It's just it's an awesome time. Preseason is such a great time to cover the NFL, because if you asked probably about 25 fan bases, not all of them, because there's some that just know. Like if you talk to Falcons fans, they know. Right. But you talk to 25 fan bases, and they have a road where it could happen for them this year.
Oh yeah,
and sure. It's the best. It's the absolute best.
Yeah, for sure. So, so we were talking before the show. I'm a Colts fan. My NFC team is the Packers, because I have family up there. Mm-hmm. You're a Chiefs fan, and your NFC team is the Vikings. I see no reason why that can't be the Final Four this year, to be honest.
For the Colts, I think it's going to depend a lot on what Matt Ryan has left in the tank. I actually think he can. I was watching him a little bit last year. He can still play. He was surrounded by some real problems in Atlanta, and I think people might be surprised what an upgrade that is at the quarterback position for them. And they've got a really good roster. Obviously, the Chiefs, their GM came from the Chiefs.
Yeah, big fan.
Yeah, and I mean, awesome at his job. It was a bummer when they lost him, but they knew they were probably going to. And that's kind of what's happened with a few guys of theirs now in the front office. But I mean, they're a really good team. Would not surprise me to see them make a big jump this year. And so it would be surprising to me to see the Vikings make it to the NFC Championship, but stranger things have happened.
Well, this happens to me all the time, and I get ripped on by the guys all the time. I always end up steering it towards the Colts. So let's you were talking about a big problem that the Colts have with Matt Ryan there and not knowing what he's got left in the tank. I see a big problem that the NFL has if they continue with this problem that I found. They like a lot of they like to even out the playing field a little bit. The better teams get the worst draft picks and the worst schedules and so forth. I saw a lot on the Chiefs' schedule that I kind of liked, that kind of favored them a bit compared to what they've had in the past. And then their draft picks, they ended up with 4 draft picks in the first 2 rounds. So so that little bit of give take didn't work out too well, because one of the better teams, the Kansas City Chiefs, are kind of getting off a little bit to their favor here, if you will. So I want to talk a little bit about the draft. It's easy to point at the draft that they have and say, they obviously made defense a focal point. Personally, I was kind of surprised to see George Karlaftis fall the way that he did. So, in my opinion, being from Indiana and watching, Purdue football from time to time, I mean, I know that there were other circumstances, but I think you guys got a kind of a star player there. But what else with that defense and those rookies coming up are you excited to see?
Sure. So they really, I mean, they took advantage of a bad situation with Tyreek Hill, in that they thought they were going to be able to retain him. Ultimately, if you want to talk about, because of the Devontae Adams contract or whatever else, Tyreek Hill kind of wanting to play Miami. They couldn't. So they kind of try to make lemonade out of lemons. Anytime you lose a singular player, that's really, really difficult. But they took advantage of the opportunity to try to remake their defense. And that's something that they really needed. Last year, they had one stretch of competent play. Outside of that, the defense was pretty bad. And it was problematic for them at various moments, including the AFC Championship. Now, the offense in the second half of that game stunk out loud. That was the real problem. But really, had the defense been able to get just one more stop, they did what they could, but, a little bit more obviously would always be helpful, and also would help them be more consistent as a team. So they've really they've kind of turned over, done this whole youth movement. You mentioned Karlaftis. He's probably going to see a fair amount of snaps rotating in with Dunlap and Clark. He had a really good preseason debut. We'll see. It's preseason. It's fake football, but you can at least gauge individual players in it. He played really well. He showed the strength and motor and technique that got him ahead in college. He also showed a little more bend around the edge than people expected. So that was one thing I wrote on, because he hardly ever, if you watch much of him in 2021, he hardly ever tried to take the edge and bend around the corner. He's a power rusher. And so it was interesting seeing him have adapted a little bit. It's exciting. But he wasn't, even their first defensive draft pick. They grabbed Trent McDuffie. They traded up to grab him at corner. And then they grabbed Brian Cook in the second round. They're really excited about him. They're excited about Josh Williams, another cornerback that they took. Really, with the Chiefs, there is a strong likelihood that they have 4 rookies at least that see hundreds and hundreds of snaps in McDuffie, Karlaftis, Cook, and Williams. And there's some chance that Leo Chanel gets on the field as kind of the Sam linebacker. They're probably going to relatively limit his snaps a little bit more. But they really are looking to replace thousands of snaps from last year, trying to get faster and more physical. Both of those were problems for them last year. And so they really had to remake everything, similar to after the 2018 season, moving from Bob Sutton to Steve Spagnuolo. They completely revamped the defense. That time they did it with veterans. This time they're trying to do it through the draft.
Yeah, outstanding. So that's what I like about these breakdowns, because I don't have that kind of insight about the Chiefs. I really don't. I follow the Colts. I follow what I can, mainly fantasy football. But so we bring on guys like you to help get that kind of insight. So I greatly appreciate that. And if you guys appreciate that at home watching, patreon.com/toiletstitles. Help us out, because that is the sponsor of our next question. You mentioned that the second half of that game, the offense kind of fell apart. I think a lot of that had to do with that offensive line. And I was surprised when I looked at the website, because obviously if you're coming on, I'm going to check out The Athletic, right? And I was kind of studying up on that offensive line, and The Athletic has the Chiefs listed, according to their rankings, as their second best run blocking offensive line, and fourth or fifth best overall in the league. What are the odds that they're going to try to steer more towards a run-heavy offense with CEH? Do you think that's a possibility?
Sure. Well, anytime Andy Reid's your coach, there's a ceiling in how often you're going to run the ball. And that's just how it is. A problem for them last year, and they adapted as the year went along, that it wasn't just the number of runs, but the style. They kept trying to hit outside zone looks, stretch plays, trying to threaten the edges of the defense. But the problem is a couple of their main guys, Trey Smith at right guard and Orlando Brown at left tackle, they are not reach block guys. They're not necessarily get out into space and move laterally guys. The rest of their line can do it, but where they really do their best work is in power stuff, in gap scheme, moving the ball straight ahead, and trying to take advantage of the fact that they're a big.
Okay, they are a big physical team, and hopefully he gets back on here shortly. But I've got George in the comments here saying, "Is this the CEH breakout year we've all been waiting for?" I got to tell you, I got to be honest. We haven't all been waiting for this. Honestly, I've never really been that big on CEH, but they don't really have a whole lot there either. Like I get that Pacheco. I keep wanting to call him Pico or whatever. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that last name, but he's making waves in camp right now and in the preseason. Seth is trying to get back on there. His device says his device isn't connected, so we're waiting for that to come back on. But personally, I think if they do go more towards a run-heavy offense, it's going to have more to do with the question marks at wide receiver. If we can get Seth back on, that was going to be my next question. I was going to lead into that chemistry with Pat Mahomes and that wide receiving core because, like, the only main wide receiver they have coming back from last year's team is Mecole Hardman. Outside of that, you've got Marquez Valdes-Scantling coming from Green Bay. You got Juju from Pittsburgh. Sky Moore, just as they were talking about, or just as Seth was talking about just a moment ago, a rookie out of Western Michigan, and then Justin Watson from the Bucks. So that's a whole set of who knows what is going to mesh and mold together. So, yep, absolutely. He should have a pretty large role if you don't believe in CEH especially. So, and even if you do, like Rojo obviously isn't the answer. So Isaiah Pacheco, be ready to draft him late because even though the hype is high, he's still going pretty late, 12th, 13th round. So there's not super huge high expectations for him. So let's see. All right. Unfortunately, a lot of this has to do with questions like inside questions. I was hoping that only a Chiefs fan would have. So I'm kind of hoping he pops back on here because you guys can hear me give my opinions about the Chiefs all day long, or log in anytime that we're recording and ask me questions. So I don't know what we're gonna do here. So let's go, Seth. Yeah, I was also going to mention Darian Kennard out of Kentucky, the offensive tackle, because they got because of that offensive line. I was kind of surprised how they fell apart towards the end of the season, and then they only drafted one offensive lineman to help fill the role. That was kind of a surprise to me as well. For what it's worth, I kind of see the Amanda. Who from the Chiefs would you like on your fantasy team this year? I won't tell Pat. All right. Personally, and I got George here to help me out, to help fill a role here. Appreciate that. But so personally, because of the value, Sky Moore, Juju, definitely Kelsey. I think Kelsey's going to have an incredible season. So, what do you think, George? Who from the Chiefs would you prefer on your fantasy rosters this year?
So if you're talking wide receivers, I want Juju. I think he's going to be the wide receiver one for that team. Tight end, clearly Kelsey. I still have him ranked as my number one tight end on the season for fantasy, and I'm actually higher on CEH than most this year, just because of the value of where you're getting him. Like you could get him in the 4th round. And that I think is a great value because there is a path for him to play above his ADP. So I don't mind taking CEH late as well. So, I mean, it's still the Chiefs, right? Like, they're going to be a good offense. Andy Reid is that. I had him, the article I did, I had Andy Reid as my number one head coach in the NFL right now. So I trust in Andy Reid. I don't think we're going to see the prolific offensives for the Chiefs that we've seen in years past, but I also think that we're going to see a more balanced Chiefs offense than we've seen in years past, and I think that'll be a good thing for both the Chiefs and their fans.
Right on, right on. Have we heard anything about the chemistry between Mahomes and that wide receiving core?
So for everything I've seen, they're saying that Juju looks good. Sky Moore has been balling out. They've avoided any type of injury, so they've had all camp, all off season. We'll know more probably in the next week or two regarding the chemistry, because you got to assume with all these new weapons, like game number 2 is now the old game number 3 in the preseason. So I gotta imagine Patrick Mahomes is going to play, at least a couple series, if not at least the first quarter of that game. So we'll know more in a couple of weeks. But right now, I haven't heard anything bad from it. But I'm not nearly as locked in with that team as your guest was.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not under the impression that the Chiefs are going to take that big of a step back in the passing game. Personally, I just think it's going to be more evenly distributed. It's going to be more involvement from more players. You're going to have more of those games that pop up where Hardman just happens to have a great game, and then the next game it's Sky Moore, and then Juju's going to be a little bit more consistent. I think you're going to be a little bit more frustrated on a fantasy front more than anything. And let's be honest, since we lost our guest, we're going to probably mostly talk fantasy football for the next 14 minutes. And speaking of which, I'm very excited to talk tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about the Frankenstein Listeners League. We're going to be talking about our drafts there. And since we're talking about the Chiefs, I'm pretty excited about my 5th round pick in Travis Kelce. I took him early in the 5th in the Frankenstein because of the 1.5 extra points per first down and 1.5 extra points per catch for tight ends. I think it's going to be huge. The projected points for Kelce was something like 220 points more than the quarterbacks that were left after that 4th round where only quarterbacks were taken. So after the top 12 quarterbacks, he was projected to score that much higher than the next quarterback. So pretty excited to have him on my roster.
Yeah, so I just got an alert from both Sleeper and from some people I follow on Twitter from ESPN. They just placed Patriots just placed Malcolm Butler on IR. So I'm not sure if they go on IR now, if it's season ending or not, but that's still a huge loss for them as a team that's already lost so much on that defense.
Yeah, no, I don't believe so. I think they actually have all the way up until like that the week right before that week 3 preseason game. So pretty much like another week and a half, I believe, is what they still have left before IR becomes one of those deals where it has to be eligible to return or it's all season. But I believe they can jump up and go to the pup at least. I'm not really sure what he's talking about here. Huge loss. What is he talking about? Malcolm Butler?
Well, let's face it. Like that secondary was already thin. They lost JC. I want to say JC Treader. That's the center. They lost their one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL to free agency. He went and signed with the Chargers, and they brought in Malcolm Butler, who was supposed to be one of their top 2 cornerbacks on that team, and he's about to get cut. Listen, I'm not going to argue with Nino, right? Like he's the Patriots fan, but they brought him in to be one of the top cornerbacks on that team, at least according to some irrational Patriot fans that I know. And it's just that team is going to be garbage this year. Nino, I love you.
Yeah. Well,
but you're welcome to the real NFL where your team is not very good for decades upon decades.
Right. Yeah. And we're supposed to be talking Chiefs, and we all hate the Patriots anyway. So because we're supposed to be talking Chiefs, we're allowed to crap on the Patriots. It's fair. It's fair game. Yeah. That's right. If you're talking about any of the other 31 teams, you can crap on the Patriots. That's how it works. Yeah. Exactly. We won't crap on Nino though. So we'll quit giving him a hard time. expectations for the Chiefs. Since I got you on here, what are your expectations of the Chiefs for 2022?
Chiefs fans are not going to be happy with me, but I don't have them making the playoffs. They have the 32nd ranked schedule in all of the NFL. It is by far the hardest schedule in the entire NFL. There's a lot of new on that offense, which I think will take time to tell. And then the division that they play in is absolutely stacked. Like, it's the most difficult division in the NFL that I can remember for a very long time. Like, the Raiders are a very good football team. The Chargers are a very good football team. And the Broncos are a very good football team. So they're going to be like most divisions, you get one or two cupcake games within your division that, if you're a good team, you should be able to go out and win. The Chiefs this year, they have no weeks off. Their schedule is absolutely brutal, and their division is even worse. Well, so, I have them finishing third in their division, and I don't have them making the playoffs.
I agree with that to a point, because the only breaks that they do get are the exact same breaks that the other teams in their division get. They play the AFC South, so they do get the Jaguars, they do get the Titans, and they do get the Texans, who are all easier victories in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think the Titans are going to be an easy.
Yeah, they are. They're nothing. Anyway.
I mean, listen, they only won the division last year. They won the number one team in the whole AFC.
Yeah, but this isn't.
That's not easy.
This isn't a Colts episode, or else I would tell you why. But anyway, so matter of fact, you can probably go back to listen to just about any other episode I've ever done, and you'll know why. But anyhow, so like I was saying, though, the rest of the AFC West also gets that exact same advantage. That's why I think if they are going to make the playoffs, it's likely going to be in a wild card format. I actually had them down as a 10-7 team. I do think that they win at least 3 of their home games within the division, and I do see some other winnable games. But I'm also basing that off of considering good chemistry between Mahomes and his new receiving core, and kind of also trying to base it off of what I think these other teams are going to be. Because like they also get the NFC West, which isn't great, but you get to play the Seahawks. I do think that the 49ers can be a very winnable team, especially if they do decide to go with Trey Lance, because I'm not a believer in Trey Lance personally. So I mean, there are some winnable games out there on top of their division games, but it's going to be a grind, man. I think the winner of this division very likely is going to have a huge advantage going into the playoffs, because they're going to have all that game experience against each other.
Yeah, no, I can't argue that. Like the team. Hey, look
He's back.
My office internet just completely freaked out on me, so that was unfortunate. I apologize.
Hey, no worries, man. Well, it happens all the time. This is why professional shows don't actually record a lot of their shows live, but we're not professional like that.
Well, and unfortunately for me, I popped in just in time to hear that the Chiefs are gonna take third in their division and miss the playoffs. So it's gonna be a tough year, apparently.
That wasn't me.
It's that schedule, man. I'm just not a fan of the schedule. They got the most difficult schedule in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be interesting to see that happen. Such a significant fall from where they've gone, but it's definitely a tough division. I think a lot's going to depend on whether Russ Wilson is Russ Wilson, or if he's Russ Wilson circa 2021, whether that was an injury issue, exactly what's gone on there, and how much of a drop off the Broncos defense gets from Fangio, whether the Chargers can really put it all together. It'll be an interesting year. I'm excited to see it. I would just be shocked. It's tough to imagine an Andy Reid coached team with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback winning fewer than 10 games. It's hard to imagine, but it depends. They're relying on a lot of rookies to play on.
There's my notes. That was my prediction, 10-7. So I'm with you.
I had them at 9 wins. So the Vegas over under is 10.5. I've got them at 9, which is still, like most years, 9 wins is great for a team, but the problem is it's just the division.
Sure. Yeah, really, really tough division. Some of the best quarterback grouping, depending on how Wilson plays this year and whether Carr continues to build on what he did the last few years. One of the best developments of talent that you've ever seen, from top to bottom in a division. You don't really have an easy out at quarterback any given week against any of these teams. And that's kind of unusual. Usually divisions with really good quarterback play, you got at least one where it's like, you've got the, kind of the redheaded stepchild of the division without a real quarterback. But no, it's a really tough division. So much is going to depend on how the Chiefs rookies do on defense, because their offense, barring a cataclysmic meltdown, is going to be a top 5 offense in efficiency again. It's just with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, it's a borderline sure thing. That I would bet my life savings on them being at least a top 5 offense in DVOA. With Reid and Mahomes, they've been either first or second 4 straight years in DVOA on offense, which is unbelievably hard to do. And even losing Tyreek Hill, I think they are going to I think they're going to be able to compensate a little bit for his loss. Probably not to maintain, depending on how everyone else does, but I just don't see them dropping off too far. Now the defense, I'd rather not talk about that because that's less fortunate.
Well, like I said, I have them down as 10-7, and with 7 teams making the playoffs, I still think that there's that real chance, that real possibility that they make the playoffs. I'm kind of envisioning it more as a wild card myself, but I'm not like George over there. So
sure.
But
Seth, while you're gone, Justin and I were talking about the wide receiver situation with Kansas City.
Yeah.
He and I both are in agreement. We think that they're going to be spread more out. Like you'll see more distribution to other wide receivers not named Tyreek Hill, being he's no longer there. Is that what you're kind of expecting for Kansas City this year as well? Is more of a balanced attack?
That's definitely what they're aiming for. They've kind of tried to do in some ways. They've tried to replace not Hill's production or Hill the player, because you can't. He's a very unique player. But what they've tried to do is replace his role with 2 different players in MVS and Juju. Because what you've got there is you've got a guy who runs a lot of shallow and intermediate routes, who's generally able to get open more quickly underneath against physical coverage, and then a pure deep threat in Valdez-Scantling. So that's the idea, is to at least try to reproduce his production between 2 guys, basically. And if they're successful in doing that, then a lot of it's going to come down in terms of ceiling on the development of Sky Moore, how McCole Hardman does. But everyone's expecting them to spread the ball out more. One thing I've heard a ton of in camp, and you never know how these things will play out in real life, is that Juju Smith-Schuster has really looked exceptional and has played really well with Mahomes, and they've developed a great rapport early. If that does happen, Mahomes has shown in the past that he will go to guys he trusts over and over and over again. And he's going to need to find someone who's that guy besides Kelsey when you're talking red zone, third downs, that kind of thing. Because teams were haloing Travis Kelsey last year. I assume they're going to have 8 guys covering him on third down this year. And someone's going to have to step up. And so far, that's been Smith-Schuster. I think he's the most likely one to get, 140 targets as opposed to 100 or something like that. And that might allow him to spike. But the wild card in all that is Sky Moore and how quickly he develops, because he would be the one who would most logically eat into that larger number of targets.
Very good, very good. Yeah, that kind of plays into Nino's question about the chemistry with MVS as well. So it's definitely going to be a storyline that's going to be worth watching, even throughout, even after the season starts. As that progression, as that relationship grows between Mahomes and his wide receivers, on a fantasy football front. See, I told you I would do it on accident at least once. On a fantasy football front, you've got to understand that if you're drafting these wide receivers at value, you have to keep them at that value and wait for the value to go up. If that production starts to go up because they're connecting more, then that's when you try to trade them if you're going to, or you take advantage of a victory.
Right. And that would be say someone like Moore, he is probably a value stash, because let's say he does Reed's offense is famously kind of difficult for rookie receivers to come into. Only a few guys have come in and been productive there. Jeremy Maclin was one of them. Deshaun Jackson did a pretty good job there. It's just hard to come in and play well as a rookie in Reed's offense, because he expects you to play X, Y, and Z. He expects you to line up all over, to know every assignment. So with Moore, like you're saying, I think the temptation will happen with people is they'll try to grab him as a value pick late. And then in the first 4 weeks goes by and he gets a total of 18 targets or so, then they're going to get rid of him. Whereas he might be the value on the back end. And it just all depends. He has great releases. He played really well in the preseason game. It's just going to be Andy Reid generally favors veterans, and he likes McCole Hardman a lot more than people realize. McCole, I think, is going to suck up some of those really cheap targets that Hill would get. Those quick wide receivers tunnel screens, those little pop passes that count as a catch, even though he's standing 2 inches in front of Mahomes. Those are the things that I think McCole Hardman's going to benefit the most from. So I think there could be some significant value for him there as well.
Excellent. So I got a question regarding the running backs for Kansas City.
Yes.
What are the odds that Ronald Jones makes this team? Because I've been saying all offseason he's probably not going to make the team. I've got it down to him and Derek Gore. And I just think, Derek Gore is more familiar with the offense. He's got rapport with the team. He knows his role. He knows what's expected from him.
Right.
And so I can't see them keeping, Rojo on this team when it comes, with my eyes, it comes down to him and Gore.
I'm not even sure Gore will make the cut at this point. I think he's hearing footsteps on the roster because he played about as badly as you can play in a preseason game. He dropped a couple passes. He had a fumble. He didn't run the ball very well. He just didn't play the way he did in a small sample size last year. Right now, if you trust the way the Chiefs divvied out the snaps in preseason, it'll be Clyde, Pacheco, and McKinnon. Yep. And I'd be surprised if they kept a fourth running back on there. And as much as Isaiah Pacheco is getting a lot of hype and he's fast, he's big, there's reasons people like him. He's catching the ball really well. Pretty good in pass pro for a rookie, which is a huge deal to get on the field. The Chiefs like Clyde Edwards-Helaire a lot more than the fantasy community does at this point. And I would be surprised if he wasn't the majority of the guy with the majority guy with Pacheco swinging in as well, barring things again not working out for him. Maybe health doesn't work out, etc. They do plan on shifting a little bit more to more of a power-oriented structure in terms of running between the tackles, which favors Edwards-Helaire a lot more because he just lacks the speed to reach the edges. That's what I was talking about before my internet went crazy. Clyde's lack of top-end speed at this next level has been really glaring. So when they're trying to hand him the ball on whether it's an outside zone or whatever else where he's trying to stretch to the edge, you can see that lack of a gear there. He just doesn't have it. I think that's why they went out and grabbed Jones before they knew what else would happen. They needed a guy who could hit the edge. Running north-south, Edwards-Helaire has been pretty good, and that's what this line is built for. So I think you'll see better production out of him, health permitting, this year.
Is that why Pat Mahomes is lining up more under center than the shotgun?
That's actually a big part of it. There was an interesting trend last year down the stretch. They lined up under center 2 or 3 times more often in the final stretch of games, like the last 8 games or so after their bye, than they had previously. And everyone talks about how teams were playing a ton of too high shells against the Chiefs last year. For one, that's just the trend the league is going in general. Everyone's running these Fangio shells. But against the Chiefs, it was constant, and no one ever blitzes them anymore. Like, it's obscene. They'll go entire games and face like one blitz. And then on that one blitz, Mahomes will hit Kelsey for a 40-yard gain. It's like, oh, yeah, that's why you don't blitz them. And so also what people are seeing, not just these shells, but linebackers are taking steps back. They're dropping at the snap. They're not respecting the run game at all. So the Chiefs were trying to do something to compensate for that. So what people saw in the preseason, them lining up much more under center, maybe more of a traditional play action, maybe some bootlegs, that type of stuff. That's a continuation of what we saw more of last year, a little more 12 personnel, just a little more condensing things at the line, trying to make teams pay for the way they've been playing Mahomes and seeing if you can batter them out of that over and over again. So I think that was a really good question, and I absolutely think you're going to see more of that this year as teams try to figure out exactly what it's going to look like in a post-Tyreek Hill world. I think you might see an Andy Reid offense that more closely resembles, it'll be a blend still, of course, but more closely resembles what it looked like, 8 years ago than what it looked like last year.
We're kind of pushing it here on time, but George, you remember the last question that you typically ask your guest, right? Before you ask it, you remember, right?
Typically it's
on these breakdowns. Don't ask it yet, but you remember, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're gonna get to that in just a second. I just want to mention real quick one time. There's one guy that we haven't mentioned, one position, one guy that we don't need to talk about because Travis Kelce is going to catch 600 passes and like 1,000 touchdowns this season.
Yeah. So he could get 200 targets.
Yeah, easily.
And I mean, and he still is. I mean, he's lost a step over the last 2 or 3 years, but he's still always open, just constantly. No one sees the field like Travis Kelce. He runs routes. I know for a fact that there are several times every game where they're in the huddle, they call the play, and as they're going, Mahomes says to Kelce, "Hey, just go get open, huh?" And he does. And that doesn't happen at the NFL level. I mean, the NFL is about precision. And Travis Kelce, I mean, he's unbelievable. If you ever get a chance just to turn on all 22 on a Chiefs game, you just watch, he's constantly open. Yeah. And it's one of the most bizarre things you'll ever see. He really could get targeted 200 times this year, and that would be hilarious.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what's that question, George? I love this question.
I'm hoping it's the record question because that's the one I've been going with, unless you're throwing me off.
Okay. All right. No, that's not the question.
That's why I was like,
he's messing with you.
Okay.
Tell you what, we'll just close out with mine. Your overall expectations. What would you consider to be a great season? Like obviously, so many teams want to say it's Super Bowl or bust. But is there also a realistic line where if it's not a Super Bowl, you would still consider it a successful season?
Getting back to the AFC Championship. And that's where with the Chiefs, that really is where the standard is at for them right now. That might change if Kelce loses a significant step, if the defense takes a huge step backwards, right? The offensive line, or Patrick Mahomes gets injured or something like that. But really, that's what they've set the standard for themselves every year, is to at least make it to the AFC Championship game. They've hosted it 4 years in a row. That, to them, anything less than that would be a disappointment.
I agree. Colts Chiefs AFC Championship game. Love it. Absolutely.
I don't know how the Colts are going to make it there when it's going to be the Miami Dolphins and the Chiefs, but I mean, Dustin, you can dream.
All right, very good. Hey, Seth, I appreciate your time. George, I appreciate you bailing me out. And also, I appreciate you getting an awesome guest on the show for tonight. Last year, I struggled to find Chiefs fans and Chiefs insiders to be able to come on the show. Clearly, I should have started following Seth a lot sooner.
A long time ago. That's
right. I'm following him now, though, so I'm on the end. I got it. So, but it's at Real MN, as in Minnesota. Chiefs fan, Seth Keysor. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.